Anyway, whiskey fans, I hope you recently enjoyed the video of the distillery I visited in the Netherlands. On that same trip, I actually had to travel down to Belgium as well. And in Belgium, I traveled even a little bit, I had to go to Brussels. I traveled even a little bit more south to visit a distillery, Cort, I don't know guys, I'm so sorry, Belgium Farm Distillery. And this place you need to check out. I mean, there's a lot of distilleries I visited in the US, in Europe, and this was one that really blew my mind because I'll be honest with you, usually when I see farm distilling or like something like that, I'm thinking marketing. But this place is so different. Grab a glass, let's talk about it. Now, what's important to mention is by the time this video comes out, I think the plan was to, in April or May of 2024, to have their own officially owned whiskey release that you can purchase. It's on their website. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but you can kind of, here's a picture of it, sign up and register, but you have to pick up the whiskey at their location. I, of course, have already signed up for one. I'm gonna go back and pick it up. I can't wait. But this is actually another Belgian whiskey. We'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but this is just something to sip on while I'm here. Actually, what we're gonna be talking about is stuff like this. So as I mentioned, they don't at the moment have a lot of like whiskeys. Maybe you can try something from their bar or stashed behind their bar or like a distiller's release. But hopefully you can do it very, very soon. And I think it's really worth it. What's important is if you're going to Brussels, these guys are just a little bit south. I took an Uber, but there's public transportation to get you there, about 30, 40 minutes, give or take. And again, as I mentioned, they are a farm distillery. So they actually, it's located, the distillery is on a farm. It's a gorgeous place. There's so many different rooms. You can really, if you're doing a business event or something, you can book a room there. I'm sure they can accommodate, but they are doing such a good, clean and efficient job. And the story of how they actually decided to open a distillery was quite cool. For starters, this farm actually used to produce apples and pears. Funny enough, and for what I'm happy this actually happened, they used to, sorry, maybe it was hard for them at the time, but a lot of these apples and pears were being sent over to Russia. And at one point, Russia just stopped buying apples and pears from them, and they had all this fruit that they didn't know what to do. And well, if you're a farmer and you have too much of something, what do? You look to distill it, and that's exactly what Cort did. And very interesting. I love the origin story. I love the ingenuity and the pivoting that they did, and I'm really, really happy they did it. Let me explain why. For starters, everything that they do is as efficient as possible. This is down to how they ferment. This is down to how they are reusing the energy that's being reproduced while they distill to help with the heating of their mashes. And also, after their fermentation and their distilling is done, by the way, they ferment and they distill on grain, which I'm a huge fan of. Our whiskeys do the same thing. I like bold flavor. I like having that grain in there. I like the oiliness that you sometimes get. It's not so much found here, but I'll explain why. And huge fan of it. Now, this means that they have a lot of grain, which had this, still probably has the water in it. So how can they be green and efficient? They have a press in the back. So after they're done with their distillation, everything is then pumped into the kind of behind the distillery room. They have another farmhouse. And there, it's actually pressed, all the juices are forced out of the grain, and that grain is also then given back to other farmers in the region. Really, everything from beginning to end, they are doing themselves, and they're finding either at their own farm or within 2 kilometers of their farm. This is amazing. A lot of their mash bills have rye in there, have wheat in there, have barley in there. So it's not just barley. But right now, they are having a maltster malt their grain, their barley. What's very, very cool is they are working on a project to open up their own malt house in the back. We spent a lot of time, distiller to distiller, talking about this because I was not so aware of the inefficiencies of using beer malt or a maltster that makes malt for beer and using that for a distillate. What's really interesting, and there's a whole rabbit hole you can dive into here, which I did, but it's not the point of this video, is when you're usually distilling, you want a lot more of the, let's say, the starches and the enzymes, which will then become sugar. But if you're making beer, you don't care about such a high efficiency, you want more of the grain, so you actually will malt a little bit hotter, and this way you are reducing some of the things that distillers like us might want. Now everything, because I brought quite a few things here, some samples and stuff that I'll quickly taste through and we'll talk about, but what I want to say is everything here is also very cleanly distilled. As you can see from their big stills, they are doing an artful job of finding a very floral note, at least I found a very floral note, but also having a clean spirit that tastes great at every stage of the production. And I asked them this, I said, so how do you kind of make the spirit that's going to be aged in a barrel for so many years? And what he told me was, you know, I have to taste everything. I have to kind of be the guy who proofs it and make sure that everything tastes good or is ready. And I want it to taste good because I have to taste it. And then I hope that it's going to taste good, or I know it's going to taste good down the line. So I thought that was a very interesting approach on it, because many, at least like European distillers that I've seen that come from a background in producing something other than whiskey, usually make very clean cuts, because that's how you make a liqueur or how you make other spirits like gin or whatnot. Now, funny enough, I said gin, so let's start with gin. I am not a huge gin fan, but they make their own London Bio Dry Gin. Now, of course, these are little small containers. You can buy the full bottles when you visit him. But what's really interesting is I talked and asked him about, I have a friend who has a distillery, of course, in Germany. In Germany, and I think in most of Switzerland too, in Germany it's a rule, in Switzerland almost everyone just does it. If you're making gin, you buy a ethanol base from a large ethanol production site. This means that you're not actually mashing and making your own alcohol. You are buying it from somebody else. You are then, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this, but adding the flavors of the Geneva and other type of whatever you're using into your gin afterwards. This is probably fine, but this is, to his knowledge, the only Belgium distillery which is using and making their own base spirit, their own ethanol, that's then later going to be used for the production of gin. We'll talk about this later as well, because they also make, like for instance here, this is their potato vodka, and I bought a small one of this. I bought a big one of their Belgium grains vodka. Now, we'll talk about this in a second, but essentially what I'm saying here is they're using very high quality stuff and they are making everything themselves. They're not sourcing anything. Why am I putting so much emphasis here? Because it's not normal to do anymore. Almost everyone sources stuff from somewhere. Hey, just by opening this, I love it. What blows my mind is it smells like a gin. It smells to me like how a gin should. You have the Geneva in there and it's what you expect. But there's still kind of, I'd say, like the distillery flavor of a lot of grain, of a lot of flour, and you can tell it's a high quality production. 42%, I think most of their stuff was 42%. We'll talk about this one later, that's pretty special, but most of their stuff came out of 42. Okay, bias, fully biased, but hear me out. If you're making your own and you are distilling and managing your own base spirit, your ethanol, you can create so much more depth. You're not just tasting here, just the bam, straight through kind of juniper or whatever they've had, kind of flavoring it later. There's depth, there's more layers to it. It's a thicker, longer spirit. Now, I drank it pure, so I don't know how many people do that, but I like to do that. And I think if you're making your own gin cocktails, you should taste it like this first, because it's a gin where I think you don't have to do a lot with it. You don't have to throw a whole bunch of different or crazy tonics in there. You can really enjoy this and really enjoy it. And if you're a real gin fan, I think you will appreciate it. It's very, very good. So that is their gin. Now, what I did, because this blew my mind, and they don't do this a lot, but they have two different vodkas. I don't even think they do this anymore. They probably have a few vodka. This is the beginning of 2024 of their potato vodka still available. I hope you can get some of this. I have never really had potato vodka before. It's not something which I have, I should say, like sought after. Now, why is this a big difference, by the way? Some people think that all vodka is made from potato. It's not actually the case. Most vodka is made from grain. There's only a few regions in the world that do make it from potato. Why? Well, I don't know why people think this. I think it was just some marketing or some movie or something that really got to take off. But potatoes are really hard to work with. Very starchy. You got to peel them. The process of production and the machines you need for it are very different. So it's quite an interesting experiment for a distillery to make. Quite a bit of risk. And if you were ever interested in tasting or seeing the difference, same distillery, very similar production, very similar distillation, grain on this side, and on this side, of course, you've got the potato. So much, you get so much more fruit, you get so much more, like the grain elements, really floral notes from the grain vodka, and kind of a rich creaminess, a lot of sweet, very starchy, of course, potatoes, of their potato vodka. Again, I don't drink a lot of vodka, but I like drinking the Cort's stuff. It's something different. Okay, this is also important. As they're doing their distillation, usually if you're producing vodka, you distill as pure as you can. And most stills will get you up in the ballpark of around 96%. On purpose, they distill their stuff under that. He said in the ballpark of around 94%. Why do they do this? Because in his opinion, leaving that 2% additional water carries through a lot more flavor. Now, Armand, vodka should not have a flavor. It's a distiller's decision, I think, to make it. I think legally you can get by on it. But I have to say, I'm really happy he did, because I want to taste the flavors. I want to see what's actually behind these spirits and what went into it. And this is a beautiful example of why you can do it. Now, why did I buy the grains vodka in a full bottle and not these little small samples? Well, I'll tell you why. I really like this. As somebody who produces and makes a lot of like moonshine right now at the time, right? This is something, you could call this very, very good moonshine. Why? I mean, by the way, you can see it's got some medals and won some awards. Usually I don't care, but here I'm happy they're getting recognized. And I don't know what the world's trophy best value, I would say best value, I would say it's much better than just value, but double gold. What's really, really interesting for me here is it's a mixed recipe from wheat, rye, and malted barley. They do an amazing job with this, and the grain, these floral notes really come through. And you can really pick that up. By the way, I should have mentioned their fermentation is kind of open air fermentation, so it's not like sealed vats. And of course, Belgian beer is pretty well known for this, especially the beer in Brussels. They have such a good yeast cultivation in the air. And they use that same yeast for the production of their spirits, which is, again, amazing. I love it. Again, this character here you can't just find anywhere else, and it's really unique. Now with that, I heavily recommend you try this, but there's some other things which are worth it as well. If you like moonshine, you're gonna love this. If you like vodka with a little bit of flavor, you're gonna love this. It's really, really, really good. And again, it excites the crap out of me for their whiskey coming later. What I should also mention, the recipe, I mentioned wheat, rye, and malted barley. Why these? It's actually a very, very old recipe that they picked out of a museum in the area. And they were able to explore that library and find old recipes for these spirits. And they've based their mash bill off of those recipes. Again, you gotta talk to them. They'll tell you way more, but it's amazing and I love it. Again, when you walk through this place, you have a very clear idea that nothing is just done for the sake of doing it. Everything has a very specific purpose and has a lot of thought and creativity behind it. Now, there's a few other things that I just want to talk to you about. One of them being they have their own Belgian beer brandy. Now, this is off a blonde Belgian beer. Again, this is important Bierbrand, what they say in Germany and Switzerland, is pretty typical. Even many distilleries that I visit make or distill beer and use that. Maybe they age a little bit, maybe they don't, but they call it Bierbrand or beer brandy. And again, sometimes you see it under 40% alcohol. Some beer liqueur might be mentioned as well. But usually it's in cooperation with a distillery and under a good kind of, for a good reason. When the beer maybe doesn't work out as well, doesn't ferment as well as they expected it to, doesn't have the body or the flavor to be a beer, something goes wrong, that brewery will then give that beer to a distillery to distill. I have done this for breweries that I know myself as well. What makes this very, very different is they are not just taking a local brewer's beer and saying, hey, what didn't work, let's distill it, let's make something out of it. They are actually making their own beer on site as well and distilling their own beer. Now, what I didn't know here is the style of Belgian beer that they're making has to be aged for 3 years. So it's not like, hey, we just made some beer, took us a few hours, and now we're going to distill it. No, they're making this beer, and actually here's a clip of their warehouse where they're aging their beer. This is not whiskey. Their whiskey is in a different location, a different warehouse, but these are their beers. So after 3 years of being in a barrel, then they're distilling high quality good beer. And this really comes through, and it's so floral. So I say it's a distiller characteristic. It's probably coming through their natural yeast and their fermentation style. Almost a little bit of licorice in there. Sweet. Yeah. It's just something so different. It's such a different experience than anything else I've had. And it's a shame, and I hope that you can one day check them out yourself and try it for yourself. It's really worth it, especially if you've had a lot of beer brandy and weren't really impressed. Try this, I think it will change that. Now, finally, there's one last thing. I know this has taken a little bit of time, but this here is the Grand Cru Bio Pastis. Now, what is this? Let me explain. It is a mix, and they call it like a balance, but it's essentially a whole bunch of different herbs. Anise, fennel seed, coriander, cinnamon, licorice, star anise, cardamom, black pepper. So it's kind of a gin. It's a different mix of different herbs. I say kind of a gin because it's, again, they make the base, but it's a spirit that has different grains added on top of it. Herbs added on top of it, sorry. And I had to give this a shot because, or I had to purchase this one as well. It is just so different than anything I've ever had. Now again, I don't know much about this stuff. These spirits are not in my wheelhouse. I'm mainly a whiskey drinker, but it's so good. It's really worth experimenting a little bit, learning something new, trying something new. And if you know anything about these herbs, or you've ever tried to use them or make your own gin or something, or even cook with them, a lot of these are very strong herbs, which are not the easiest to play around with, and too much is really quickly too much, and too little, you barely taste it. So it's such an amazing flavor, and it's so funny because I have the beer brand here too. The licorice that they had in this one, the beer brand, compared to this is turned up a whole lot. But the complexity that you get is on a different level. I can see if you're a cook and you appreciate these herbs and use a lot of these herbs in your cooking, you're really going to get a kick out of this. Nose to palate, you get a lot of licorice, but the finish is amazingly long, amazingly complex, and it goes through a cycle of these different flavors. Again, artfully done. This also has some gold medals and stuff associated with it. They're doing a great job. You gotta check these guys out. They are a farm and family run distillery. It is the Forafum, and they are doing an amazing job. I really, really like it. They do also produce spirits for others. So if you want to find a very, very good contract distiller in Belgium, I would reach out to them because they can help you do an amazing, amazing product. Now be careful. He was giving me, we were talking about different projects and things we've worked on, I've worked on, he's worked on. And I loved it because he matched my philosophy so well. It has to sound good, it has to be interesting, it has to be fun, or fuck it. They take the same approach with experimentation. I was very lucky. They opened up and they let me try a whole bunch of very interesting things, different experiments that they've done. Again, they had a very, very cool, unfortunately, I think I wasn't able to test this, but he told me about an experiment where they had taken their beer, which was aged for 3 years. They then aged whiskey in it. And then after that, they aged beer in it again for 3 years. This is like 9 years worth of aging to give you a beer at the very end. Like, this is crazy. This is unheard of. And you could have their whiskey that was aged in this as well too. But they're not just doing something to sell a whole bunch of products or to be in every grocery chain. No, they are making an amazingly good product for you to enjoy. And it's very artistically, masterfully done. And that's something that really stuck out to me when visiting the Cort Distillery. Guys, it was amazing. If you're in the area, if you are not, and you can somehow stop by there, I would heavily, heavily, heavily recommend it. Again, it's not that far away from Brussels. You can make a day trip down. It is such a cool place, such a cool experience. Do it. I took a whole bunch of notes while I was there. There's so much stuff that I know I missed. Did I mention huge sherry fans? So a lot of their whiskey is aged only in sherry. In fact, their whiskey, which you can see here, is, or hopefully you can be able to see that, is also aged solely or majority in sherry barrels. I can't wait to taste it. They put a lot of emphasis in picking very, very good sherry, and it comes through. You can't miss it. With that, guys, cheers to you, whatever the hell I've got around me now. I hope you enjoy it, no matter what you're drinking. From Belgium, liqueur, beer, whatnot. Cheers to you. Until your next glass. Bye now.